group will focus on the Agriculture Resilience Act, and it is Alyssa Ramirez who will be giving the briefing. Take it away.
All right. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to share with you the work our team has focused on pertaining to the implementation of the Agriculture Resilience Act. My name is Alyssa Ramirez, and I'll be your briefer today. But I want to thank the team for the phenomenal work that they've done throughout the term to put this together, as well as our faculty advisor, Matt Palmer, for his advice and guidance. We'll start by looking at the problem. The agriculture sector is a large contributor of greenhouse gas emissions, but is also impacted negatively by climate change. The Agriculture Resilience Act aims to address some of these issues, such as soil degradation and the loss of soil organic matter that reduces carbon storage and degrades soil health, the release of methane and carbon dioxide from livestock and manure, and more broadly, climate vulnerability and the threat to agriculture production from a changing climate. I'll start by presenting the case of Cedar Mountain Farm and how they work to address some of these issues. When the farm owners purchased the property in 1999, the forage and soil health on the dairy pasture was severely degraded, which hindered its ability to sequester carbon. This Vermont farm has remediated its once damaged soil through farmland preservation. Farm owner Kelly Gewalt and her husband Stephen Leslie had worked with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, a division of the USDA, to implement sustainable agriculture practices. And after consulting with a Vermont NRCS grazing specialist, they were able to receive financial and technical assistance distributed under the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP, which focuses on funding on-farm improvements, soil amendment programs, and providing field-based technical assistance. In this particular instance, the approach was to install tensile fencing to designate prescribed grazing areas for livestock. So you can see here the livestock passing between designated pastures fenced on either side to allow vegetation to grow between grazing periods. In conjunction, a covered manure storage system, as well as cover crops work to improve the soil. Focusing on the broader goals, the Agriculture Resilience Act aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030 and to reach net zero emissions by 2040. Though this is ambitious, the goal is to bolster efforts leading to a more sustainable food system. In addition to a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, if passed, the bill increases federal investment in research and education efforts in the sector, in addition to the implementation of new programs on soil health, livestock waste emission reduction, food waste mitigation, and on-farm renewable energy. Pardon me. To address the aforementioned issues, we chose to model two specific programs mentioned in the bill as an example, but I wanted to note that the bill itself is quite robust with many programs within it. One program that we focused on is alternative manure management, and the other on private grazing land management. We spoke extensively with Vermont NRCS staff and thus have used the state as our prototype for the deployment of these services, but the programs will be national with similar implementation plans developed for the other states. We'll highlight the organizational planning strategies of both programs, beginning with the Alternative Manure Management Program. This program will subsidize livestock manure methane management strategies in an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This can include technology such as slatted flooring pictured here, which are used for the as waste pits for the collection and storage of manure to be later used for composting to reintegrate valuable nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus into the soil. The implementation of this program will increase accessibility for farmers to make on-farm changes by adding staff and grant money to allow new or previously participating farms to make more substantial transitions towards sustainable strategies. This program will consist of 4 staff members, 1 agriculture engineer supervisor, 1 assistant for field operations, 1 administrative support staff member, and 1 grant technician. The grant technician shall serve as support for both programs. Accounting for staff expenses and grants brings the estimated total budget to $1,050,000. In order to determine program progress, the agriculture engineer will track several different measurements throughout the program deployment, including the annual number of grant applications and the number of new projects, the amount of money awarded, the adherence to the budget, avoided methane emissions, and the impact on the constructed environment of the surrounding ecosystem. These metrics will be tracked regularly in a data management tool by the agriculture engineer and their supporting team, and an analysis of the tracked data will be performed annually to allow for regular updates and potential shifts in program outreach and metrics. Transitioning to our second program, the private grazing land management program functions to improve soil health through techniques such as conversion from confined facilities to rotational grazing management or prescribed grazing management. This can reduce overgrazing, can keep forage healthy, improve soil biota, and increase vegetation productivity, making soils more resilient to climate change. This program will consist of 3 staff members, 1 rangeland management specialist, 1 grazing land management specialist, and 1 administrative support staff member. The private grazing land program will receive support from the staff member identified in the alternative manure management program. And the total budget for this program, including staff expenses and grants, totals $350,000. To measure program progress, the program will monitor the number of grant applications and enrolled farmers, the program's adherence to the budget, the quantity of carbon sequestered, and the impact on ecosystem services. To determine the carbon metrics, samples will be collected by NRCS field officers and then sent to analytical labs. In order to evaluate the impact that the private grazing land program has on greenhouse gas emissions, soil will be tested once at the beginning of the grant agreement and annually after. Both programs follow a similar implementation process. When farmers initially apply for technical and/or financial assistance under EQIP, a field officer deploys to assess the unique needs of the farm. To determine carbon metrics, soil samples will be collected to identify the existing state of the soil health. The appropriate specialist to each program would then make assessments based on soil data and provide recommendations to the farm regarding advised management strategies. During this phase, grant money would be dispersed. After grant money is dispersed, implementation will commence and periodic progress review will occur. In the case of the alternative manure management program, an agriculture engineer will appraise infrastructure for manure capture and storage. And lastly, phase 4 will consist of the integration of feedback and the measurement of success. A soil surveyor will collect samples on an annual basis to monitor the impacts and improvements that the program has on soil health. And lastly, reports will be sent up the chain of command to the state conservationist for review. Unfortunately, the USDA, which manages the NRCS, has a long history of prejudicial treatment with dispersal of financial and technical assistance. It is vital for the dispersal of grants to promote outreach and partnerships across diverse groups. Therefore, the demographics of grant awardees must be measured, and representation of NRCS offices must also be diverse and inclusive. There will be an annual analysis to allow for feedback on how well these programs and the NRCS is doing in meeting these requirements. Although our budget calculations were for the state of Vermont as our prototype, the bill is national, and similar expansions will occur in the other state offices that are proportional to the percentage of funding that they receive for similar programs. On the national scale, the private grazing land program and the alternative manure management program equate to 50 million and 150 million respectively for each fiscal year from 2021 to 2030. Ultimately, the design of these programs would aim to improve soil carbon sequestration rates, reduce emissions in the agriculture sector, and move towards more sustainable strategies in the US overall. The overarching goals proposed in the Agriculture Resilience Act are included in President-elect Biden's climate change plans, demonstrating that these ideals are becoming part of a broader political framework, allowing for optimism that we will see continued action towards these objectives in the future. Thank you. I'll now take any questions.
Very nice job, Alyssa. Congratulations to your group. Stephanie, do we have any questioners?
So you guys can raise your hand. Great, we have two. So Alina, let me unmute you. All right, you should be able to talk. Great.
Alyssa, thank you so much for such a wonderful and very impressive presentation. So I was wondering whether there would be any additional obstacles for implementing the program.
Yeah, I mean, you can always, make contingency plans, and things will always be, thrown into the plan that'll, that you'll have to adapt to. Certain obstacles, I would say, are variable types of things, such as measuring some of the metrics. So, for example, soil health. There might be some things that that maybe skew some of the soil health data that's collected. For example, if there was a local event such as a drought or extreme freeze, those are things that are going to be reflected in the soil health. So things like that are certainly difficulties that we would have to overcome. I would say another obstacle would be getting farmers to get on board with the broader goals of the bill. A lot of farmers might have, certain management practices in place, and changing from those can be first very costly, a huge risk, to the farmers and their investment. And so, yeah, I would say those are probably some of the problems that we would foresee.
Okay, thank you.
We have another question from Karen.
Thanks so much for that presentation, Alyssa. I have a quick question. I really appreciated your explanation of how you're going to be checking on the quantity of carbon sequestered and tracking that, but I was wondering how you're going to be tracking the methane emissions.
Yeah, I am personally not really familiar with the actual measurement of methane emissions in the soil. The types of the scientific background that goes into it. I would say that it is something that is monitored by the soil conservationists. But yeah, I would say that is something that certainly is difficult to measure.
Okay. Any other questions, Stephanie?
Last call for questions. Oh, Professor Jocelyn, hang on, let me unmute you. All right.
Great. Thanks very much, Alyssa. It's a great presentation. I wondered how much this bill incorporates the existing cooperative extension agents as perhaps some of those specialists that you are drawing upon.
I'm sorry?
Is there any, I wondered whether the USDA has cooperative extension agents, and I was curious whether they are part of the framework of this bill.
Yeah, they do. There is a substantial component of the bill that focuses on expanding research, research and education, and working with like universities is certainly something that would be a relationship that is beneficial to to the research, and I would say certainly partnerships with universities. I would say local organizations as well, to take into account those priorities for for small farmers, for farm workers. So yeah, I would say it is sort of an aggregate of a lot of different agencies that would benefit to the implementation and to hearing multiple voices that are an important component of our agriculture system.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa, and thank you to the group for an excellent presentation.